Fellas, have you been doing Onslaught waves 1 to 10 and noticing that your fire team members are dipping? Well, that's because that was the preferred farming method before today. Essentially, people would just form fire teams, get in there, knock out 10 waves, and then bounce, and essentially repeat that process over and over. Now, I don't know about you, but that's pretty damn boring. The entire point of a horde mode is to go as far as you can, and in this case, all the way to wave 50. But that's where the changes are coming into play today. Bungie has made a substantial pass to Onslaught's reward structure, with the purpose of these changes substantially rewarding you the further you go in Onslaught. First, you'll have a chance for one additional weapon to drop when you complete a wave. The drop chance will increase per wave until you get your weapon, with the drop being guaranteed on wave 50. Second, a bonus weapon will also drop after you complete wave 50 in either difficulty. This change, along with the first, means that completing 50 waves will guarantee 2 additional weapons. But then to take it a step further, Bungie is increasing the number of trophies of bravery that you receive from completing waves 40 and 50 of Onslaught and waves 30, 40, and 50 on Legend difficulty. Now, this is made simply because Lord Shaxx and his rank cannot be reset. But let me just say, guys, turning in trophies of bravery has definitely netted me a couple shiny drops. You have just as much of a chance to get a shiny drop from that as you do from completing Onslaught. So all in all, guys, everything should be a lot more rewarding for those of us that stick it out all to wave 50, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Yes, the new rewards are in this week. Hammerhead and Forbearance are the drops. Today, though, we're going to go over tips on how to get to wave 50. Some of you may already know these, but everything I'm going to be giving you today, guys, is for my folks that are on Legend that are trying to reach that final wave. And not only reach it, but successfully complete it. Tip number 1. Guys, in our original video for Onslaught, we didn't talk very highly of decoys. But let me just say, decoys are literally the best thing you can get. Turrets are good, tripwires are alright, but decoys will save your life. Now, it's not the aggro that they pull on just normal enemies, although that is nice. The main reason why we like decoys is that it stops Tormentors. Now, again, you have 3 levels of decoys. You got your sweeper bot, your bot with Twilight Garrison, and then Shaxx himself. And yes, these are pretty expensive, but completely worth it. And just about every single time, I always purchase a decoy first. Even if I don't completely upgrade it, I will purchase a decoy just in case a Tormentor spawns while I'm defending that ADU. What you want to make sure, though, is that if a Tormentor spawns, drag the Tormentor's attention to that decoy. And I have seen even a sweeper bot decoy tank a Tormentor for the entire wave. Now, a lot of people completely focus their attention on the Tormentors, and I'm not saying you can't do that either, but you have time. If the Tormentor does in fact aggro to the decoy, you can literally just leave him there and go deal with the ads. And a lot of people do like a 2-1 split, and now they have 2 people deal with the Tormentor while 1 person deal with ads, or vice versa. It really just comes down to you and your teammates. The point is, guys, decoys will save your life. Lean on them. The last thing you want to do, though, if you happen to get aggro from a Tormentor, is drag them to the ADU. Stop it. You need to get that thing to the decoy and let the decoy do its job. Tip number 2. On the topic of decoys, turns out you can heal your decoys. If you find that your Lord Shaxx is suddenly blinking red, that means, yeah, he's about to die. But if you pick up the batteries, you can run them over there and literally throw them directly at the decoy. And this will heal them. And you essentially just keep doing this until they're no longer pulsing red. Now, I've heard a lot of different things that the batteries can actually heal. Everything from turrets to the decoys to literally guardians themselves. Personally, I have not tested this myself, as I don't think it's really optimal to sit there behind another guardian with a battery throwing it at their body. But for your decoys that can't defend themselves, you definitely want to heal them back up. Even if your Lord Shaxx is on the other side of the map and you're sitting there holding a battery, you will save yourself more scrap taking that battery all the way to your tier 3 Shaxx, healing them up, than you would throwing that battery at the ADU. Because it costs over 10,000 scrap just to get a fully upgraded decoy. And it's a good chance, unless you're in the very final stages of Onslaught, that you're going to make your way in rotation to one of the ADUs that you previously defended. Which is why I like to go around and make sure those decoys that I originally bought are still healthy. This saves me a lot of scrap in the long run. Tip number 3. Now, the topic of batteries, there is a glitch where you can duplicate your ADU batteries. Now, I don't think this is actually going to get fixed anytime soon, but if you're in that situation where your ADU is literally screaming at you for help, there's a couple ways to do this. The most consistent way is to pick up a battery, have another one sitting on the ground next to you, and then when you go to throw it, simply just interact to pick up the one that's on the ground. this should duplicate it. You can do this as many times as you want until the battery timer runs out. Now, if you only have one battery, you can actually throw the battery and use your class ability at the same time. This too will duplicate it, although you're limited to that one class ability. But your teammates can pick it up and they can use their class ability, so on and so forth. Now, I've also heard that you can actually swap weapons while throwing the battery, and this too will duplicate it. But I will say it's a bit more difficult to pull off, especially for my controller players. All in all, guys, duplicating isn't something that I say you have to do, and definitely don't go out of your way to do it. But if you're in a situation where your ADU is about to blow up and you're about to wipe and you're like on wave 30 or 40 where you done spent nearly 45 minutes in this thing, by God, duplicate away. Tip number 4. This is by far the thickest tip here, as I'm going to talk about the rounds that can mess your team up, especially during the later waves. Now, there are usually going to be augment waves, which will spawn various bosses and or objectives that you need to deal with, or else you'll wipe. Now, these augments only spawn on the 3rd and 9th wave of a set. Remember that, guys. That's key. It's things like this that can keep you blowing a super too soon. Pay attention to those waves, because the rotations, they matter. Now, we of course have Tormentors, which you can expect to see at most 2 during an entire match of Onslaught. Now, this is not counting the lightning round. Yes, there's a lightning round in which Tormentors literally spawn up all over the place, but it's extremely rare, and those Tormentors are easier to deal with. But it's the Tormentors that actually spawn during the Onslaught activity that can mess you up, and it seems to be pretty random. I've had them spawn literally on waves 2 and 3, but I've also had them spawn literally at wave 49, where they are their most amped. But you can kind of keep this in the back of your mind as you're playing Onslaught. If you're like, dude, I'm getting into like wave 45, I've only seen one Tormentor this entire run. Well, man, it's a good chance you're about to see another. But at the same time, if you're on wave 30 and you've already had 2 waves of Tormentors, you're good, dude. Don't worry about it. At the same time, the best weapons that I like to use against Tormentors are really anything that does precision damage. There's a lot of favorites out there. People like Leviathan's Breath, Sleeper Simulant. But honestly, guys, I've used a variety of things. I've used machine guns. I've used Aggressceptor. I've used Cold Hard. Just hitting those crit spots. Again, the main thing with Tormentors is just lead them to a decoy, let them get hung up on the decoy, worry about the ads, and then deal with the Tormentor, or do the 2-1 split that we talked about. The Tormentors are not the only thing that can mess you up. Yes, some will say they're the most dangerous, but there's a lot of others to watch out for. First, we have Sky Bombers. They're pretty easy to deal with. You just need to seek them out, and usually there'll be an indicator on the map showing where they are, but that may take a bit to pop up. They have a bit more health, but overall nothing too difficult to take out. The only issue with Sky Bombers is that their bombs do hurt the ADU pretty badly. And if your ADU is one shot and you enter a wave with Sky Bombers, they'll pretty much KO your ADU right out the gates. And that's because they initially start with bombing your ADU. So if your ADU is really weak, send one person immediately to find those Sky Bombers and get those kills down. Now, there's also a shielded Sky Bomber. Normally, this is a very large target, whether it's Big Greg or Big Brig, but normally you just stand in this darkness icky and do damage to them. But yeah, they are a lot meatier. The good thing is that they're pretty easy to spot, and there's normally an indicator on your map. What you don't want to do in these situations, especially the big Sky Bombers, is leave the ADU. You have a number of ads that are continuously spawning. You must leave at least 1, maybe even 2 people behind to defending the ADU and send someone to go deal with that Sky Bomber. Now, there's a variety of weapons you can use against the Brig and the Ogres that do a lot of damage. Keep in mind, though, the Brig is a bit more annoying, as you got to break that plate before you can actually start dealing precision damage. What I would suggest with the Brig is use your super. If you got a damage dealing super, use that first, because you actually do extra damage against the Brig, and then the moment you break the plate, your super damage will actually be cut down substantially, and that's when you want to do damage with a crit-based weapon. Essentially, what you use against Tormentors, you can use it here. Next, I'm going to talk about Demolitionists. Now, Demolitionists can sneak up on you. I've gotten them in wave 49, and yes, we have wiped. Demolitionists are probably the second hardest, just under Tormentors. And in some cases, they're even harder because they don't aggro the decoys. Or if they do, they don't stay on the decoys like a Tormentor does. They're especially difficult to deal with because they kind of spawn in late into the round. Instead of them spawning immediately when everything else spawns, they wait a bit. And if you're dealing with Hive, suddenly you'll be surrounded by 2 giant Hive Knights. And if you're dealing with Fallen, it's 2 huge Fallen Captains. And in the later waves, they can instantly shred you. They also teleport a bit. So if they teleport to you, even if you think you're running away, if they TP to you, they will immediately melee and kill you right on the spot. These are definitely targets you want to prioritize. This is not a moment where you're like, okay, I'm gonna go deal with that. Good luck, teammates. Please don't do that. Look at the Demolitionists together as a squad and shred them as quickly as you can. Now, I will recommend, unless you have a well, I wouldn't necessarily stand right on the ADU because they will easily teleport to you, hit you, and hit the ADU at the same time. And in a lot of cases, I actually will bait the ADU if I'm dealing with Demolitionists. No lie, it's a tough tough wave, and depending on when you get Demolitionist, it can be substantially tougher in those later waves. Feel free to check out our build video, guys. We go over a number of builds that can help save you in a pinch. But that's why paying attention to what wave you're on, you can expect those things. Now, this also takes us to another encounter to keep in mind. Mines. Now, this is a very simple encounter. You'll have mines spread out throughout the battlefield that you need to capture by defusing, and there's normally an ogre or a brig that's defending them. Now, again, kind of like dealing with the sky bombers, you don't want to immediately vacate the ADU or it's going to get destroyed while you're gone. This is where having somebody to go defuse those bombs is so clutch. Now, we've used things like Night Stalker and Invis. I've also used our tank build with Strongholds and Lament, and just sit there on the point, defusing, capping. Even if I don't go for the kill right then, that's all right. You want to prioritize those mines, because yes, if you let that timer go all the way down and that mine explodes, that's it, guys. That's a GG's. So you do want to prioritize those mines, but just not everybody. And again, communication is really key here. Now, on the topic of these difficult rounds, things that will really help you is tip number 5, bonus rounds. Now, considering that these are bonus rounds, they're not mandatory. You don't have to kill yourself to complete them, but they're extremely easy. And what they give you is heavy ammo once you complete them, which can save you and your fire team in a pinch. They also net you a trophy of bravery. Now, there's a variety of bonus rounds. You can get bonus rounds that require you to collect 20 motes that drop from defeating enemies or clearing a wave within a certain amount of time. Maybe you got to capture a point or just shoot these 3 pyramid objects in the sky. Now, if your entire team has plenty of ammo, dude, don't go out of your way to go capture that point completely away from the ADU, leaving it defenseless. Obviously, defending the ADU is priority number 1, but hitting those bonus rounds are very, very good, as this will spawn heavy ammo. And yes, this is shared. And this is very important, guys. You want to make sure you always tell your teammates when you pull heavy. I don't care if you look at your friend and literally shoot them all over the place and bag the heavy ammo box, do it. This lets them know in Destiny sign language, hey, I'm about to pull this, please come get it. Nothing frustrates me more than looking around and seeing the heavy ammo box getting pulled and I'm sprinting toward it while it's counting down and I don't make it in time, simply because my teammate didn't convey to me that they pulled heavy. Now, at the same time, I would actually be a little conservative with pulling that heavy just in general. For instance, any round that ends with 6, I normally never pick up heavy. You see, that's the round that we go to the pyramid ship and we have to go dunk the spark. Normally, while going there, getting kills on ads, which wouldn't require me to have heavy, as you could take your time, it's very likely that I get a heavy brick, at least 1 to drop for me. Now, if you come out of that after dunking the spark and you still don't have heavy, then by all means, go ahead and pull it. There's no reason to conserve it, because once you move locations after dealing with the boss, that heavy ammo box is gone. But keep in mind, guys, the heavy ammo crates only despawns after waves ending in 0. Waves 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, which it doesn't matter after that point. Only then does the heavy ammo crates actually despawn. And you don't even need to pull this heavy ammo before going into the boss encounters, because you always have a rally flag, which is very frustrating because I'll see people on waves 29, 39, 49, and they're conserving their heavy. And it's like, bro, we literally have a rally flag below with thy load, and suddenly you're wiping against Demolitionists on wave 49, all because people don't realize how the heavy ammo economy works within Onslaught. So that's very key, guys. Really, the main thing is, if you're nearing boss waves, pull heavy. You might as well use it. And if you ever do pull heavy, communicate to your teammates. I've got a few ways, for instance, not pulling heavy on wave 6, 16, 26, 36, etc., simply because I'm trying to optimize. But I think for the most part, everyone would be just fine as long as they pull heavy, they tell their teammates. Now, tip number 6, I'm going to talk about weapons and loadouts. Guys, we did an entire video on weapons and loadouts, 9 of them in total. We've also done a number of build battle videos. Build battles is essentially where someone comes and nominates one of their builds and they go head to head in a 1v1. But let me just say, some of those builds do change just slightly week to week, and that's because the overcharged weapon changes week to week. Guys, if you go look at the activity, you'll see the modifiers there at the bottom left end of your screen. And yes, those overcharged weapons change week to week, which can definitely change up what you use in your loadout. So if you're rocking like a machine gun build and you're like, dude, I saw Cross using this, why am I not getting as many benefits as he was getting? That's probably because in week 1, it was overcharged. Now, at the same token, just going into your artifact mods and selecting the weapons that you're going to be bringing in there will make a substantial difference in your damage. Even if you're like, dude, I have Lament, I don't need to have anti-barrier sidearm on. Guys, you still need to go click anti-barrier sidearm. This overcharges that weapon. This will give you a flat 25% damage buff. So please select these things to just give you free damage. I'm going to link the video down below, though, to our 9 favorite builds. At the same time, if you're interested, we actually have an entire Reddit thread where folks are submitting builds, and yes, the most upvoted builds will be utilized in our next build battle. This is actually a free way for folks to submit their builds without having to go through the eggplant process within our Twitch stream. Moving on, tip number 7. Guys, you can see exactly the boss you're about to encounter without even starting the activity. You see, if you run up here to the entrance and have someone on your team place a rally flag down, this will result in them, of course, having full super, full ammo, everything. They can't rally after that. They've already rallied. But for yourself, you can actually shoot the nodes here on the side of the door, open the door up, and see the boss you're about to fight. This is especially convenient when you have bosses like Shriekers that are up in the air. And if you're holding a sword or a glaive, you're obviously going to be screwed. So in that situation, you should swap to your rangier loadouts, then rally, and then proceed to push up. This makes a big difference, guys. And again, you want to just make sure your teammates don't go rushing in. But opening the door does not start the encounter. It's not until you run into the room and actually pull aggro from your enemies, that's when the encounter starts. Or of course, until you shoot them. But this gives you an excellent opportunity to see exactly what it is you're about to be going up against and then make your loadout swaps accordingly. Now, the topic of bosses, keep in mind the weekly boss also changes. And they seem to be pretty unique. For instance, we had Greg the first week. The second week, we had this fallen boss that liked to rush you. And this was especially difficult for folks that were rocking things like Dragon's Breath. But a Dragon's Breath on this guy, he's literally going to rush you and the ignition is going to kill you. At the same time, my loadout changed quite drastically against him because considering how aggressive he was being, I didn't feel comfortable using rockets as that would probably get me killed. So I actually instead used swords or even things like glaives to deal with this boss. So knowing what you're going up against, you can kind of tell by just looking at them. But at the same time, just dealing with that encounter, having that experience will better prepare you down the road. Now, I know somebody's going to bring it up, Cross. What about utilizing your supers before you run in? You can do that. Yeah, you can shoot a tether off in there. If you got like a Gathering Storm super, like a one and done super, you could shoot that off and then rally immediately afterwards. Here's the problem. The moment you do that, you immediately alert the enemy, which means hopefully everybody just rallied. At the same time, this also messes you up if you're trying to get set up in the room, which takes us to tip number 8. Personally, guys, when it comes to dealing damage in the room, I find it better to just have good DPS loadouts, go in there, drop everything down, and start doing damage. Now, my DPS loadouts may change week to week depending on what the surge may be, but at the same time, weapons that do really good were things like Leviathan's Breath that I utilize boss after boss. And a single well and a debuff alongside 3 people rocking Leviathan's Breath with the catalyst, dude, you're gonna shred pretty much every single boss down. And only special scenarios would require us to really make any changes. However, if you do find yourself in a huge pinch, you're like, dude, I'm scared, everything's killing me, I need to find some level of cover. Where there are cheese spots, there's the spots literally right next to the boss on the back side of the room. You'll see these little cubbies behind the statues, and a lot of people have utilized these spots during their solo runs. Matter of fact, there's another spot that if you go up to the right, you can jump up through this hole, and this allows you to look down through this crack and deal damage to the boss. Now, let me just say this, guys, none of this is required. I personally think the best thing to do is just go in there, square up with the enemy, have a buff of some sort, whether it's a bubble or a well, and just do damage. And you'll be amazed how quickly you can shred pretty much every single one of these bosses if you've got good DPS weapons. Some people like Sleeper Simulants, some people like rockets, which are really good because even if rockets are not the search, you still have mods like Argent Ordnance and Overload Rockets, which yes, will give that buff and damage to your rockets. The only issue with rockets is, of course, you got certain bosses that are really skinny or they may move a lot and they're a bit more difficult to land those shots on. All in all though, guys, I would say the boss rooms are probably the easiest part of Onslaught. Yes, some of them can be more difficult than the others, especially the Wave 50 bosses, but the rest of them are pretty straightforward. It's Onslaught itself that will get you in a jam, especially on the waves that sneak up on you. Those Tormentor waves, those Demolitionist waves, those are the kind of things that can get you in a bind. So guys, those are our tips for getting to Wave 50 in Onslaught. Good luck to all of you out there. And for my folks that are looking to do some runs with us, we will be live on our Twitch. We pull people right there from the stream. We also do in-game LFG so people can just join on us there. But I would love for you to join us. And with the rewards being increased for reaching level 50, it's all the more reason for all of us to reach and complete that final wave. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.